Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Calvin Coyles here with another episode of The Wild Spotlight. I'm joined by the incredible Eric Winters, as an author and a life coach and a leadership expert around the world. We have clients in too many countries for me to mention. He's the author of the brand new book as well, Swipe Right on Your Best Self, which is going to be a real page turner. You can get a free chapter of the book as well from his website. I'll put that up into the show notes as well. What a fascinating life, Eric, that you've lived. And just I had a moment before our podcast to go through some of the journey that you've been on from the UK to Scotland to Abu Dhabi and the UAE, and then to Germany, and then to Sydney, and then you were talking about doing work in China. So what a wonderful opportunity to get an exposure to your world. And I'm really fascinated today to talk about self-leadership, courageous action, and how to be able to live your best life and create your best self, and all the things that go into that. So thank you so much for being with us. I deeply appreciate your time today.
Calvin, it's a pleasure to be here with you, a real joy. And yeah, I do like to travel. And what agonizing times these are, hey, for those of us, for those of us that like to move around and explore new places. We are all stuck in, we all have to learn tolerance and patience. I didn't really want to, between you and me. It wasn't my intention. This wasn't what I had in mind. But hey, that's the situation we're in. We will be able to travel again, and I am looking forward to coming back over the water and spending more time in New Zealand. I had a 2-day workshop lined up with the ICF just before the COVID crisis hit. It's on pause. The moment we get a little bit of stability in the situation, I'll be over there.
Nice. Well, we're going to be heading over to New Zealand ourselves next weekend. In fact, I fly Wednesday from Perth, and we've got a conference over there, and we've got people obviously all over the world. So it'd be nice to be able to get back in there and start doing some more events and doing some things. Eric, I'd love to start with a bit of backstory. Tell our audience a little bit about how you came to be in this field of sort of your human potential and leadership and all the things that go into that. I'd love to get the arc and the narrative of how you came to be a specialist in this world.
Yeah, sure. So I've been doing this for about 12 years now, working in the leadership development space. But prior to that, I had another career. I had 20 years. Can you believe that? 20 years working as a consultant in the IT industry, mostly with IBM. Right. And I worked, as you were saying earlier on, I worked in Germany, lived and worked in fabulous Munich for 3 years, terrific. In the United Arab Emirates, in Abu Dhabi for 2 years, in Bonnie, Scotland for 8. And latterly in Australia. And what I was finding was it didn't matter where I was. There was brilliant leadership in all of those areas, really highly talented, very skilled, and with a lot of experience. And yet, regardless of the culture, there were some leaders, when the pressure was on, when the Qantas booking system has gone down, Calvin, I can tell you there's a lot of excitement in IBM because IBM pays a fine for every second that it doesn't work.
Wow.
It's very expensive, a lot of phones ringing, a lot of pressure. And under those circumstances, there were some managers who could manage to maintain their equanimity, get the best out of themselves, and more importantly, get the best out of their teams. Yes. They were able to tap into what was best and strongest in their people and maintain a sense of effective, productive calm. And it was a joy to watch and to be a part of. Yeah. And there were other leaders, equally skilled, equally intelligent, equally talented, when the pressure was on, would to some degree or not lose it. Yeah. They'd feel the pressure, they would crumble, and they would infect others with their anxiety, with their worry. And I was curious about, hang on, I've seen this now in multiple cultures, what's happening? What makes the difference? And so I took a step back and immersed myself. I indulged myself in 2 master's degrees in human behavior science, and it was fabulous. It was absolutely extraordinary. There's such a body of knowledge out there that has a lot to say, a lot to contribute about when people are at their best. What are the workplace contexts that support us in stepping up and doing great work and helping others to do great work? And what are these workplace contexts which erode our capability? And it turns out there's a set of well-known skills and mindsets that anyone can develop. It's not something you're born with, and not something that you have to begin with. All of us can develop these. And so it turns out that some managers, by chance in life, through lucky happenstance, have developed these capabilities, this suite of skills and competencies to manage themselves, and others haven't. So that's what I'm working on now, helping to share those capabilities to help everyone do better.
I think that that's such a fantastic reference point for this conversation today, because I was watching a video on your website before our call today, and you were talking about challenges in life, and you're talking about the challenges of, for example, getting laid off, or the challenge of not getting a promotion, or maybe the challenge of having to move to another country, or the challenges, for example, my wife and I this morning had a meeting with our obstetrician. We've got our first child on the way. That's a challenge.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And growing a business and all of the stuff that goes into that. And for one of the quotes that I try to live by, and we share with our clients, and people certainly listening to this podcast will have heard it before, is I believe that leaders anticipate and act, and followers hope and react. And so for me, so much of leadership is your ability to anticipate challenge, or at least anticipate that challenge is likely to occur. And then, of course, prepare yourself accordingly for that challenge, so that when something does happen, when a stressful situation does arise, you're able to not just meet the challenges of the moment, but exceed them. So I'm really fascinated to understand, given your double masters, what is the science telling us? What are those sort of critical ingredients for competence under high pressure environments? And you can have all the skills in the world, but what is the difference that makes the difference in your work?
Yeah, and I love that distinction you made between being reactive and being proactive or creative, choosing what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And so what the science tells us is that human beings are by nature, this is woven into our DNA, highly reactive creatures. We're animals, and the primary purpose, the core purpose of any animal is to stay alive.
Yes.
Stay alive. And so inevitably we are fearful, and we are quick to worry, quick to catastrophize, quick to dwell on what's not gone well in the past. I like to say that there are three human predicaments that hold us all back.
Should I ask this question? Great.
Yeah. Three. The first one is, if you're a human, you actually live in two worlds. The first world is the same world that animals live in, the real physical world, but also we live in our heads. And it's estimated we spend about half of our lives not actually looking at each other and tasting the foods we eat and experiencing the real world, but we're in our minds, imagining the future, remembering the past. But the nature of being a human is that we tend not to spend most of our time remembering all of the good things that have happened to us. We reflect upon, the mistakes, the errors, the regrets, the hurts, the wrongs.
Yes.
Or we're looking into the future, and we're fretting about the future. Yeah. We're thinking about how things may not work. And I was talking to a friend just this week, and they tried on one of these virtual reality headsets. Have you tried one on yet, Calvin?
Yeah, I have actually, in Dubai.
Yeah.
In UAE.
Right. They're quite compelling. When they're done well, they can be quite believable. This friend whacked one on, and they were, at the time they put it on, they were on the ground floor of an electronics store, okay? And there's a big carpet in front of them, big space, so they couldn't hurt themselves. Yep. And they put on this headset, and suddenly they were on top of a skyscraper.
Wow.
And they were on the edge. The edge was just in front. And the salesman said, just take one step forward, because you know you're in this carpet. Just take a step forward. And this guy looked in his imagination. He was seeing a virtual world. He said, "I can't do it. I can't. No, I've got to stay here." And he was laughing about it afterwards. But the things that we conjure up in our imagination, the things that we know are not real, have enormous power to influence us. So we're hugely influenced by things that are not real. Ideas influence us. And unfortunately, a lot of these ideas are negative. We have this negativity bias, as you well know. We tend to. So that's the first human predicament. We've got this powerful imagination, and we've got this tendency to hold back. Second human predicament is that we live in an external world which feeds us junk values, a consistent diet of junk values. It tells us relentlessly that to be happy, if you want to be happy, well, what you need primarily is other people's good opinion. You know, they've got to like you. You need the world to like you, and you also need more stuff. You need a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And by the way, you don't have enough stuff. So the media, the advertising world tells us, and this is relentless. We can't go anywhere without being told. Yeah. Unfortunately, currently, you're not popular enough, not successful enough. You're not young enough. You're not talented enough. You're not skilled enough. You're simply inadequate. But lucky for you, we have a fragrance, or a fragrance, a smell. Imagine, how is a smell supposed to change? No, we've got something, and we promise that this, maybe it's a watch. Yeah, if you had this watch, oh, everything will change. Everything will change.
Yeah.
And of course, we want to feel better, and we subtly, these messages, they land, and we are trained day in, day out to feel lack, a sense of lack, an experience of lack. This experience of lack dissolves our courage. It makes us feel not up to the task. It saps us. It saps us. And the other really toxic message we get is that we deserve to be comfortable all the time. No one should challenge your thinking. No, that's cruel. Don't disagree with this, but that's unkind. So we mustn't be challenged. We need to stay comfortable. Temperature a bit too warm, Calvin? Let me turn that down for you. So we're kept in extraordinary comfort, and our willingness to experience discomfort is being eroded.
Yes.
Now this is a problem, because if we're going to lead a courageous life, start a family, have a child, build a relationship, build a business, that comes with a lot of uncertainty, a lot of not knowing for sure how things are going to turn out. It requires courage. And courage, of course, isn't an absence of fear. It's taking action in the presence of fear. So our culture is eroding from us our capability to stay with discomfort, to be able to tolerate discomfort. That's number two. Toxic, a culture of junk values. Number three, I call this the biggest elephant. The biggest elephant in the room. It's the thing we're not allowed to talk about, Calvin. It's just too upsetting, and we mustn't upset each other, so let's not talk about it. And it's the fact that we are mortal. We are only here for a while. Now, we don't like to think about this. We don't like to think about death, talk about death, push it out of the way, keep the streets clear of any sign, and don't ever talk about it. Now, on the one hand, yeah, we feel better in the moment. The downside is when we don't accept and really embrace our limited lifespan, we cheat ourselves of the sense of urgency that is really required to live well today while we can. And if I may, I'd encourage your listeners to visit our website, super website called count.life, count.life. And all you need to do at count.life is you type in your date of birth, you type in how long you think you get. Good man. I can see you've got a copy. You've got a copy. Hey, great minds think alike, Calvin.
Yeah.
Now, there's something really powerful, isn't there, about seeing the number of weeks you have left, not being given a number, but having a visual representation of the number of weeks of life we have left.
Yeah.
And I don't know, let me ask you, what is your experience when you look at the output from count.life?
I haven't seen count.life, but I've got that
same
thing. Yeah. So for me, when I look at that, it's a reminder of, hey, seize this moment, because one, you don't know actually if you've got all the squares left on that. So that's number one. So it brings top of mind awareness to the fact that this is a game that this is finite. So you eventually the clock will run out. There's an assumption that I'm going to have all the boxes there, but I don't actually know that to be the case. And then every box is a week effectively in the thing. So if every box is like, did I use this box effectively? Because I'm never going to get this box back ever again. And I saw actually a post recently about this. And they're talking about, just to your second point, around this energy of lack. And they're talking about, I think it was a quote from Warren Buffett, and he'd said, don't think about the new car or the new house or the watch or whatever it is as amount of money. Think about how many weeks or hours of your life it took you to acquire the money to do that. So it's like, is that new car worth 60 weeks of your life? Because that's effectively what you had to give up in order to accumulate that piece of stuff. And I thought, wow, when you put it in that context, you have a different relationship with life and time.
Really nice, really nice. Yeah, we undervalue the value of our irreplaceable minutes, Calvin. And this isn't new knowledge, of course. The Stoics knew this 2,000 years ago. And I bet philosophers prior to that knew this too. Yeah. Time, there's nothing more important than the time we have. And when we neglect to do what you're doing, and that's acknowledge, you've got a lovely visual there of the weeks of your life that's left. When we neglect that, we feel like we've got forever. Oh, I'll do it next week. And you made a good point. One, you've got this graphic of how many weeks you probably have. Now, as you know, and I know, it all might come to a stunning end next week. We might have 1 week left for all we know. But there's something else, that the situation's actually even worse. I've got even worse news, and this isn't news, you'll recognize this, I know, but those weeks, you and I will not have as much vitality in every week of our remaining lives. We've perhaps got maybe 100% today. We're on firing on all cylinders. That last 10 years, last 5 years, we're not going to be as dynamic. We'll be wise, sure, but we're not going to have as much energy. We've got the most amount of energy this week, right now. You and I will never be more empowered to reach for what we want in our personal relationships, in our professional lives, than now. Now is the best time.
Good reminder.
Yeah, so those are the 3 human predicaments.
Love it.
So that's the situation. So unfortunately, what a lot of people do is say, oh, courage, yeah. I'll just use willpower. I'll use willpower. But that neglects the 3 human predicaments. That is an emotionally unintelligent approach. Now, I'm still a fan of willpower. It has its place. There's times we just need to force ourselves to do what needs to be done.
Yes.
However, that's one tool in the kit bag, or an arrow in the quiver, which I'm gesturing on my back. An arrow in the quiver. But we need more than one arrow in our quiver. We need more. Yep. And another approach is, instead of trying to use force, sheer brute force, to just do something, it's instead, when we feel distress and anxiety about something that's meaningful, we want to do, is to allow ourselves to feel it. Not to get lost in it, not to exaggerate it, but not to numb it. And this is a superpower. When we can, and it's been said before, feel the fear and do it anyway, and do it because it matters, then we're changing our driver from acting perhaps out of fear and being reactive to acting out of an approach mentality, moving towards what we care about. It's more, you could say, heart-based.
Well, I was going to ask about this, Eric, with regards to the significance that purpose has in courageous action. And I think, one, if you've got an awareness of step 3 you just mentioned, which is, hey, I'm not going to live forever. So one of my favorite books that I read as starting my personal development journey, this would be nearly 2 decades ago now, was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Covey, right? And
I've been reading it today, coincidentally, revisiting it. It's a classic.
It's great. It's fantastic. And I always remember the exercise of getting you to write out your eulogy, one as your partner, one as your friend, and one as a work colleague, I think it was. And in that, it was like, okay, well, what does the end game look like? If you've only got, Cal, however many squares left, what do you want to accomplish with the squares you've got left? And I think that gives people a sense of purpose, and that makes it easier for me to now make a sacrifice in the short term for the long term, or to make a decision when I'm in indecision. So what's the experience with the role that purpose plays in making a decision that most people wouldn't normally make because fear is greater than their courage, but can purpose be a catalyst for courageous action?
Yeah, absolutely. Without purpose, we are on autopilot. We're just drifting. We're going whichever way the wind blows on a particular day. And that'll take us somewhere, but it's unlikely to be somewhere especially rewarding if you're just being blown somewhere.
Yeah.
So no, humans are purposeful animals. We are at our best when we are choosing a direction and investing our efforts to go in that direction. And you're absolutely right. Classic book, 7 Habits, and it all begins with, well, one, recognizing that you have a choice. Yeah. And then deciding, okay, what matters to me? Beginning with the end in mind. What is important? And this takes us to a really important learning from a palliative care nurse called Bronnie Ware. She was taking care of people in their last few weeks and months of life. And she was hearing the same regrets again and again from people. And she heard that the number one regret of the dying was, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life that others expected of me. A life true to myself, not the life that others expected of me. And so that your point you're making is so well made. We need to choose our own purpose, because if we don't, you can be absolutely sure that others will have a purpose for us. Well-funded organizations have plans for how you ought to spend your money and your time, Calvin.
Yes.
They've got a lot invested in trying to persuade you to buy their stuff and live their way. So if we're going to avoid the number one regret of the dying, we need to author our own purposeful life. To author it, to choose for ourselves, to decide what matters. How do we want to show up? What do we choose to care about? Now, at times that will be aligned with what our family wants for us, what our community wants for us, what our broader culture, but not always. It will not always be in alignment. And having the capacity to choose to do what matters to you, even when broader society doesn't approve, requires courage. That's why it's just so important we develop the capability to know what matters and choose to act on what matters, even while it feels uncomfortable, not waiting for confidence.
Yeah, 100%. One of the quotes that we live by at Wild is that fear, nervousness, discomfort, and anxiety is your soul's compass towards growth.
Love it. Love it.
And to embrace that feeling. And for me, I've obviously built a life and a business of taking courageous action. And for me, what I often find works very well when I'm in moments of doubt and I'm struggling to reconcile that is I think about my grandparents. And they made a decision when I was about 3 or so years old. They said they're living in the northeast of England at the time. The UK is not in a great place at that time in the early 90s. And they said, look, we want to have a better life for our grandchildren. They had a purpose beyond themselves. Let's create something better. And so they said, well, let's move to Australia. They'd never been here before. They didn't know anyone in Australia, but they figured, hey, it can't be worse than what it is. And if it is, we'll come back. But they made the decision to uproot their whole family, move to another country and rebuild their lives. Now, that set them back probably 5 or 10 years based off where they were in the UK economically. But because they're in a better environment, they've obviously exploded exponentially since then in just the quality of their life and obviously what they've been able to create economically. And I take a lot of solace in the idea that really there's going to be no decisions I have to make in my life that'll be more significant than the decision that they make in their life when I was 4 to say, we're going to come and do this crazy thing. That's an obscene thing to do. You say most people, hey, I want you, if you're not happy with your life right now, move your whole family to another country you've never been before in the hope that it's better. That's ludicrous. So I take a lot of solace in that. But for someone that maybe doesn't have that proxy, when they're in that moment, when they're thinking about even just the small courageous action of, do I approach the guy or the girl at the bar? or the courageous action, do I ask for a pay rise from my boss? Or do I quit and start a business? Or do I say no to a marriage that maybe I said yes to under the wrong pretense, and now I want to live my best life? Or whatever that courageous decision is, in small things and big things. In that moment of decision, what would you recommend is some strategies or sort of tactics that can help somebody put courage above fear?
Yeah. And I like this point. I think people, when they talk about courage, they think of big acts of courage, wrestling ISIS terrorists in a plane or something. And, maybe that'll happen someday. But actually, most of our life is peppered with small acts of courage. It's making a phone call. It's asking for what we want in a relationship or at work. As you say, you get a lot of really good examples there. Small acts of courage. So what can we do? The first thing I'd say is, ideally, the preparation begins before the moment of courage. So there's a lot we can do in advance so that we're in a state at that time where we're less reactive and more choiceful.
Yes.
So it's kind of well known, but it must be mentioned. We must attend to the fundamentals before we worry about advanced mindsets and clever psycho strategies. We've got to attend to our physiology. And the number one thing is sleep. If you want to lead a courageous life, you've got to attend to not just the duration of your sleep, you know this, but the quality.
Yes.
The quality of the hours. We get an emotional intelligence makeover every night if you get enough REM sleep. It's during that REM sleep that your emotional circuits get tuned. Don't get that sufficient REM sleep, you will be more impulsive and you will surrender to urges and you will be more reactive. Not because you're a bad person, but because you're a tired person. So we've absolutely got to attend to our physiology. Sleep has the biggest impact, but what we eat, and I know you've spoken about this in other podcasts, what we eat and our exercise, how we move. These things literally embolden us. We are emboldened by eating well and sleeping sufficiently and having high quality sleep and moving throughout our day. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you want to be bold in your life, is knowing what you care about. You were talking earlier on about purpose, knowing what matters to you, knowing how you want to show up. Now, if you don't know how you want to show up, then it makes making a decision, do I speak up or do I keep quiet, much, much harder.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So we need to have our criteria. We need to have our compass. You want to choose which direction to go in? It's good to have a direction to go in.
Yeah.
It makes it a lot easier to choose. Do I go this way or that way? So we need to know what our values are, how we want to show up. That's the first thing. The next thing, at the moment of challenge, the very moment of challenge, it's been said very beautifully, of course, that there is a space between stimulus and response.
Yes.
There is a space. We need to extend that space as best we can. It's the choice point by pausing. If you're at a point where you're wondering, do I do this or don't I? Do I act? Sometimes an act of courage is an act of restraint. It's choosing not to speak your mind, not to send that email.
Yeah.
My partner sent an email she wished she hadn't sent yesterday. There was the space between stimulus and response. It was too narrow. Off it went. So we need, just pausing. So I've got a 3-step mnemonic I use to help me to choose well. And it's this. It's notice. It's called notice, name, now what. So at the time of challenge, 1, you notice that you are feeling challenged. So you become an observer of the experience. Perhaps you can feel a tightness in the chest. Yeah. Notice what you're telling yourself. Notice. Second step is to name it. So name, okay, that's anxiety, that's fear, that's worry. Or I'm telling myself no one will like it. I'm telling myself once again I'm not good enough or whatever. But you name the thought. And the third step is now what? Now what would the kind of person I want to be do? Notice, name, now what? It just gives us a little bit of space, to choose better.
Yeah, that's great. And I love the question, the very end question there, which is not just now what do I want to do, but now what would the kind of person I want to be do?
Yes.
So that's a huge distinction.
It is, and it just helps you again get a little bit of just distance.
Yes.
There are times when it's best not to think about the self, not to think about me, and the moment you say, what would the kind of person I want to be do? It's kind of you, but it's also not you.
Yeah, it's the aspirational you.
Yeah, and the cleverness about this is that it does not trigger the same amount of fear and worry. That person, the aspirational you, has these capabilities.
Yeah, they got their shit together.
They do.
They're not stressed right now and tired and hungry and all of those things. So
they do it. Yeah, and I haven't made up those steps. I have. I was going to say religiously, but I have gone to a lot of trouble to harvest many other clever people's ideas and pull them together. So that's
I love all of those things. I think the foundational pillars there of sleeping, of eating, and of moving well are fantastic. I had a client yesterday, one of my platinum clients, running a very stressful business right now, very high functioning executive, but under the pump. And I remember one of the first questions that I asked him when we started working together, I said, how would you currently rate your ability to handle pressure and stress? Are you currently falling short? Are you meeting your expectations? Or do you have the capacity to meet and exceed expectations? And a lot of that capability or that capacity comes to, did you sleep well? Are you exercising and training? Do you feel like you've got a good family life at the moment? Are you on top of that? Because if you've got the foundations in place, you can build from that. But if those foundations are shaky, it's very, very difficult. So I think that can't be underestimated. And you can really dive into that. There's a fantastic podcast that everyone could check out as well regarding sleep from Matthew Walker. I was going to say it wasn't Tim Ferriss, although I do believe he did a podcast with him as well. It was with Joe Rogan and Matthew Walker. Unbelievable. And Matt's got a great book as well on sleep science. So there's some really good stuff there.
It's superb. Why We Sleep. It's just an absolutely brilliant book. Everyone should read it. Yeah. And but you can, if you don't like reading a whole book, just listening to one of those podcasts will give you the key messages. Yeah. And you will never think about sleeping quite the same way again.
It was his point around being awake is like low-level brain damage. I thought, wow, that's unbelievable. And I went in, particularly my early days, you talk about longevity and vibrancy and how we have obviously a finite energy resource that over time deteriorates. I thought about some of my early days on the road and the travel and all the stuff that would go into that and thinking, I'm surprised I could even function. Now that sleep is so sacred to me. I used to have a mindset of 3, 4, 5 hours push through. No. Now if I can get 8, 10 hours, I'll take it wherever I can. And it's a priority. So I think that's huge. And you don't realize how big that is until you go 3 or 4 days without it, and then you realize everything crumbles.
No, that's right. It is subtle. We don't get enough sleep. If you only get, say, 5 hours sleep, it's kind of obvious the next day you're not performing well. But the reality is we are still underperforming, even if we lose 15 minutes. It's subtle, but we're not making quite as effective decisions. We are misinterpreting other people's faces. Yeah. We're seeing malintent where there's none. Yeah. So every minute counts. Sleep, we've got to prioritize it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I really love that those 3 points: notice, name it, and now what. I think that's a fantastic principle and something very easy for somebody to have in place, top of mind, whether that be on a card, a note, something on their phone, when they're in that stressful situation. It's not so complicated that it requires a lot of thinking that you don't have in the moment, but it's quick enough to go, okay, how am I feeling? Yeah. Let's put a name to it. Let's label it. That allows me to create a dissociation. So I'm an observer of my own experience. And now let me choose intentionally how I want to show up in this moment. And even if, I think as well, this is important to notice, for most people, when they start doing something similar to this, the first couple of times you're going to name it, but you're going to be so frustrated in the pattern of acting on it that you'll name it, you'll do it, and you'll still follow through, and it'll be a shitty decision. But what it does is allows you now to reflect and say, actually, I could have chosen something different, as opposed to reflecting your immediate response and not having known, actually, I could have made a different choice there, and what might have that choice have been.
Yeah, it's something we can get better at.
Yes.
These are not quick fixes, but they are strategies which research shows work, that we actually do when we, and this, now what am I going to do? That's not something to think about at the time of challenge for the first time. You know, we really want to be doing is doing what you were talking about earlier, and that's planning ahead. Okay, I know tonight I'm going to have a conversation. I know it's going to be challenging, or perhaps it's a business conversation. Okay. What is the kind of person that I'd really aspire to be? How would they show up? What does that look like? So we want to be thinking about that in advance, so that when we get to that moment, the heat is on, we're feeling fired up, worried, anxious, angry, maybe. We can recall, oh yeah, no, I thought about this. That's right. No, I said I would, and I don't know what, I'd pause and I would ask for more information, and I'd do whatever I planned to do. We don't want to be reactive at those times.
Absolutely. And for people that are listening to this, that, you know, naturally when you ask people to consider what would their better self or better version of themselves do, for some people they struggle with going, well, I'm not that person, right? And so naturally this idea of fake it till you make it comes up. And that's not something that I prescribe to, but what I'd like to see everyone listening, that this might be a better fit for you, is to say, I'm working on it until I own it. You know, Calvin Coolidge, President of the United States, once said, I was never a brave man. I just pretended like I was until I became one. Or effectively, I worked on becoming one until I became one. So I think that, you know, one of the things that I remember learning from Simon Sinek was to talk about that emotions are skills. And so courage, if you think about it, that as an emotion, it's also a skill to be courageous. And so like right now, if you've not practiced being courageous, you're not going to be very courageous. But if you can practice doing that in the small things, then those small things will accumulate. And more often than not, what I've found, and this is certainly the experience of people like, for example, the Navy SEALs, they have a statement, which is, you don't rise to the occasion in life, you fall to your lowest level of conditioning. And so I like to live by a principle, which is how you do anything is how you do everything. If I'm not willing to be courageous on a small thing, like, for example, if I order a coffee and they get the order wrong, and I don't have the courage to correct that and say, hey, actually, sorry, I wanted something different. Can we change that? If I don't have the ability to ask for that, how am I going to ask for a pay rise or for a big contract, or, you know, to bring up something significant with my wife? It's just not going to happen. So start with the small, easy wins, build confidence and momentum doing that. And then it'll be like, well, I do this all the time. It's an easy thing for me to do.
You are spot on. You're spot on. And I've heard it said that some of the most successful basketball coaches, they have their teams tie up their laces on their shoes with excellence. And they're using exactly the same principle you're talking about. You know what, guys? We're going to do everything to the same high standard. We're not just going to play with excellence, but you're going to put on your shoes. You're going to lift up your socks with excellence. We're going to bring that standard to everything we do. So you're right. How we do anything is incredibly how we do everything.
I want to just get one final point from you with regards to the book and the principle of, you know, you're becoming your best self, right? And the idea of swiping right on your best self. I think that there's obviously a beautiful, I get the metaphor you're going with there, but I'd love just to hear that from you about why you named it that, and what would you say, other than courageous action and self-leadership, what are some of the key pillars if I'm looking to, you know, put me first and of course work on creating my best self? What are some of those key pillars?
Yeah, sure. So the name of the book, right now, I saw a chart this morning actually on Twitter showing that the number of people who met their partners on the internet has skyrocketed from something like 7% 15 years ago to 35%.
Wow.
It's just a steep line going up. And all of the other ways, I met them at church, I met them at work, I met them through friends, they've all taken a nosedive. And as you'll know, in a lot of these apps and they all broadly follow a similar path. You have a profile, you're presented, a bit like a sushi train, Calvin, a bit like a sushi train. You're presented one at a time, with these tasty dishes. And you get to, am I going to swipe that? Well, will I choose that or will I let it pass?
Depends on what color the bottom of the sushi roll is. It depends if it's an expensive dish or not.
That's right. And there are no inexpensive dates. So we spend a lot of time thinking about who we want to be with in life, what kind of a partner we want to be with. And with these apps, we choose them by swiping right. Now, but there's somebody else that you're going to be with for the rest of your life that's going to have an even more important impact on your well-being. And that's yourself.
Yes.
So I've titled my book, Swipe Right on Your Best Self, to really underline that it is a choice. How we show up isn't something that happens to us. We get to choose. We have this capability anyway to choose, a capability that we can develop and get better at.
Yes.
So the book is all about strategies and skills that we can use to get better. So how do we do this? I reckon there are 3 important mindsets. We've attended to the biology, so we've taken care of our sleep and our exercise and our food. There are 3 mindsets which support us to live more courageously. Number 1, an attitude of defiant gratitude, Calvin. Defiant gratitude. The world out there is telling us that we're not enough. We don't have enough. You're not enough friends, not enough money. You're insufficient. And so instead of that, we can be defiantly grateful for what we do have in life. So instead of having our attention directed towards what's missing, we can use the intention of our attention to notice what we do have. We can want what we do have in life. And there are many things that we all take for granted. It's just inevitable. The things we see each day, we take for granted.
Yeah.
The fact that you and I can talk now live for nothing is absolutely wonderful. And we've been doing this, I'm sure you have conversations with people on the other side of the planet in real time. Isn't it amazing? Absolutely astonishing. So, defiant gratitude. The second thing, self-compassion. It's actually, we don't talk about it a lot, but it's actually quite tough being a human being, having a human mind, living in this human world. It's not easy. But the good news is, according to perhaps the world's leading researcher into self-compassion, Christine Neff, she says one of the core elements of that, of building self-compassion, is common humanity. It's understanding that you are not isolated. You are just like everyone else. We don't want to be comparing our insides to other people's outsides and assuming, oh, everyone else has got it together. No one else seems to be worried. We're all in this together. If we can be kind to ourselves, it paradoxically doesn't disempower us, it empowers us. We become more motivated to do what we can. Yes. That's the second mindset, self-compassion. And the third mindset is one of what I call courageous authenticity, a mindset of courageous authenticity. And this is the willingness to author our own lives, to take ownership of our time alive and decide for ourselves what matters for us and what doesn't. Decide what we'll accept for others and what we won't. To align our actions with what's personally important. Courageous authenticity.
Wow. I've written 8 pages of notes on our chat today. So that's me scribbling away crazily. And you know what? I thank you deeply for all the insights today. When Jade, our media manager, first connected with me about a podcast, she said, what type of people do you want to interview? Tell me about what sort of stuff. I said, I don't care who I interview, providing that they're incredibly passionate and talented at what they do. And it's a sort of conversation that I want to continue forever and I don't want to stop. Right. And ideally, I want to learn from everyone that we have on board. And Eric, I would say that you hit all of those notes on the hymn sheet, so to speak, flawlessly. So thank you so much for your time today. There's some fantastic stuff in there, really fantastic stuff that's deeply practical and will be truly transformational for people that are watching this. And, I remember there's a great book that I got given by my brother-in-law actually for Christmas one year from Jocko Willink, who had wrote previously Extreme Ownership with Leif Babin, but he wrote another book which was, I think, something around courage or discipline equals freedom. So it's like a table book, right? It's like a book for your coffee table. And he talked about, there was a line in that book that got me, and I think it summarizes beautifully what we've talked about today, which was that weakness or strength is not something that happens overnight. You're being someone that is a weak person is the accumulation of micro decisions that you never stepped up and didn't take courageous action with. And on the same token, being a strong person that has self-leadership and creates their best selves and lives their best lives doesn't happen in one decision. It's the accumulation of all those little things that lead people down a particular pathway. And that methodology put together, I think, is remarkable. If we want to find out more about you, Eric, where do we go? How do we connect in with you more on the back end of today's podcast?
You can find more about me at my website. And it's the same place where you can download the first chapter of the book for free.
Right.
So it's ericwinters.com.au. But it's been a pleasure, a real pleasure to spend time with you and spend time with such a like-minded individual, Calvin. It's been a joy.
Great. Vice versa. Thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate your time. And to everyone that's listening, if you enjoyed today, please email through some questions. We'll pass them on to Eric, of course. Leave a review wherever you watch the podcast, or check us out on YouTube, of course. And until I see you live or online, be bold, have fun, go make an impact in the world, and we'll see you on the wild side. Thank you for joining us.